Proton therapy is a cutting-edge cancer treatment that precisely targets tumors without affecting healthy tissue and organs. That means fewer side effects, better outcomes, and new hope for even the most complex cancer cases. And in New York State, it's only available at the New York Proton Center. Visit nyproton.com to learn more about proton therapy and request a consultation. The New York Proton Center. Precisely revolutionary cancer care.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight?
Aha!
Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, Disney has announced that they're returning Jimmy Kimmel Live to the airways effective Tuesday, ending his suspension for making offensive and dishonest comments about Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk following his brutal political assassination in Utah. A Disney spokesman said, and I quote, "Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show to the air on Tuesday." So it appears that Disney believes the outrage has subsided and they go back to business as usual, with Kimmel spewing his anti-Trump invective virtually every single night. In fact, a study by the New York Post showed that 97% of Kimmel's political commentary was anti-Trump. Therefore, the people will have to demonstrate that Kimmel's antics are intolerable, but do so by creating enough market pressure for Disney to officially cut their ties with this left-wing lowlife. Since the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, the right has gone on offensive, targeting individuals who are openly expressing glee at Charlie Kirk's brutal murder with tactics that the left has used for part of their cancel culture campaigns in recent years. The left, as a result, are actually feeling the pain. Now they are losing their jobs, being deluged with angry messages from impatient patriots and experiencing social isolation as a result of their actions. As the left once emphatically stated, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. Their words, not mine. Now they are being forced to choke on their own words, and, well, they don't like it very much. The left, in response, is pointing out the supposed hypocrisy of the right, adopting their tactics. The left loves to snarkily reference the principles of the right, principles they do not believe in themselves, and manipulate those of us on the right on a disingenuous and completely cynical basis. This can be an effective strategy because conservatives at their core are morally decent people who do not want to be hypocrites. You see, those on the left do not operate under these same standards. They're willing to lie, cheat, steal, deceive, and adopt any unethical tactic necessary to win. This explains their Lucifer-inspired Bible, Rules for Radicals, written by the famous communist radical Saul Alinsky. Remember his most important rule, which is always accuse your opponents, your enemies, of that which you yourself are actually doing. This gives them a major tactical advantage when going up against those of us on the right in the sphere of politics, where the worst tends to rise to the top. The left has diabolically and clandestinely infiltrated key societal institutions to be able to crush their enemies. The left's iteration of cancel culture was the beginning of the Bolshevization of America, the way I look at it. They operated as their own private Stasi, patrolling social media posts and threatening different entities into every strong-willed conservative being silenced. They hope to cancel people like me, making us unable to obtain jobs, get bank accounts, or even put food on our families' tables. These are the tactics they used. I had 980,000 followers on Twitter in 2017 when I was unceremoniously canceled simply because I was a supporter of President Donald Trump and I was a harsh critic of the Mueller witch hunt, which I correctly called a witch hunt at the time. Now, thanks to the disclosures of the Director of Central Intelligence, or I should say, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we know that I was absolutely right. Because of the unforeseen rise of generational political talent in President Trump, the script has now been completely flipped. The culture has changed. The left overreached, and the public has grown frustrated with the left's warped and alien ideology. The left has, at the same time, written the cancel culture blueprint, has proven its effectiveness. So why should the right not use this tool? Turnabout is fair play, after all, according to some. Well, because I believe in the First Amendment and I believe in free speech, I understand that the First Amendment and the rules regarding free speech are particularly designed to protect speech that is repugnant, disgusting, and offensive. Before the Kirk assassination, many on the right would probably have accepted equivocations to not embrace cancel culture tactics. But to do so would become as bad as they are, and keeping the high moral ground, to me, is of the utmost importance. These are reasonable points, but after last week, the right is no longer shackled by these kinds of objections. The right understands if they lose everything they hold dear, it will all be ripped away from us, and they will no longer be afraid to get our hands dirty. You see, the left could previously gaslight the right, and the weak conservative Inc. old guard could keep their people on the reservation, voting Republican intermittently, but not entertaining notions that seemed too radical or too extreme. So patriotic groups like the John Birch Society were purged from the fold. Congressman Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan, both friends of mine, were treated like lepers when they ran for president for going against the neocon globalist orthodoxy that dominated both parties. The great Ronald Reagan was embraced only after he vanquished George H.W. Bush for the Republican nomination in 1980, and then grudgingly took Bush as his vice presidential running mate. It took a personality as big as Donald Trump to shatter this glass ceiling imposed by the left and controlled by the right, and has been completely shattered, and the center of the party demands drastic action against the left, and we will no longer accept excuses for inaction. But that action comes in the place of defunding a group like Antifa, who are actually causing mayhem, violence, and yes, death. Is there no better example than what happened in the country following the death of George Floyd, which was to say the destruction of millions of dollars of both public and private property, the injury of thousands and the death of hundreds, and what happened in the wake of Charlie Kirk's brutal political assassination? Prayer vigils across the country, indeed, across the world. Charlie Kirk's memorial over the weekend drew in excess of 250,000 people across the country who were touched by Charlie Kirk's life and who wanted to celebrate it after it was robbed from us by an assassin's bullet. Kirk's wife, Erica, talked about how she's forgiven the killer, following in the footsteps of Christ, who forgave all those who betrayed him and put him to a brutal death on the cross. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance appeared, and both of them were extraordinarily effective, talking about Kirk's legacy and how it will live on to be even more enthusiastically followed following his murder. I actually believe that Kirk now goes down in history as a seminal, important figure, much like Barry Goldwater, who founded the modern conservative political movement, Ronald Reagan, who rose from the ashes of Goldwater's defeat to win the White House twice, and yes, Donald J. Trump himself, who essentially was elected by the same political coalition that elected Reagan. Charlie Kirk's memorial was a rousing and touching event. He's becoming a rallying cry for conservatives around the world. People are not living in fear, believing if they speak out, they might get shot like Kirk did. They're ready to sacrifice for their beliefs and get on the front lines in the battle for freedom against the radical left. The time is now not to be timid. It's time to be bold. And millions are willing to do whatever it takes to defeat the radical left. But that does not include wholesale censorship, because free speech must be paramount. Meanwhile, in California, would-be President Governor Gavin Newsom signed legislation on Saturday that would stop law enforcement, including federal officers, from being able to wear masks while conducting operations in the state. At a bill signing ceremony, Governor Newsom said, "The impact of these policies all across the city, our state, and the nation are terrifying. It's like a dystopian sci-fi movie," he said. "Unmarked cars, people in masks, people quite literally disappearing, no due process, no rights in democracy where we have rights." That is a complete bastardization of what is, of course, really happening. The reason why the left wants federal agents, particularly those who work for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, to be unmasked is so they can identify officers, dox them, and subject them to harassment and threats. Border czar Tom Homan, a good friend of mine, has wisely told ICE agents to mask up as they conduct raids and enforce federal immigration law. I doubt that the feds are going to comply with Newsom's new rules. Let him try to enforce it. The supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution prevents state officials from locking federal agents up for enforcing federal law. This law by Newsom is just window dressing as he gears up for his presidential run. On the other hand, he kind of reminds me of Governor Mike Dukakis of Massachusetts. In other words, will Gavin Newsom run on the idea that he'll do for America what he did for California? That's not much of a record to run on. Meanwhile, in New York City, a Muslim supporter of New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani was floored after he was told of Mamdani's plan to decriminalize prostitution in the city. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo, during an appearance at an Islamic center in the Bronx, told an attendee there about Mamdani's plan to essentially legalize prostitution, and the Muslims did not believe Cuomo, which is understandable given Governor Cuomo's history of telling falsehoods. However, in this case, Cuomo was actually telling the truth. The Muslim individual said he believed Mamdani would never ever sponsor a bill that would legalize prostitution as a Muslim brother. This, however, was wrong. There will be a reality check for many Mamdani supporters when they realize the totality of his radical agenda. He's done a good job of duping the public, painting himself as an independent reformer, an outsider who opposes the entrenched political corruption of figures like the current mayor, Eric Adams, but the branding is entirely deceptive. You see, Mamdani is a radical socialist who makes even Senator Bernie Sanders look moderate by comparison. He won't be able to help himself once he's mayor if he wins, and the idea that Governor Kathy Hochul would serve as a check on him, since the authority and money for New York City flows through the state, was erased last week when she enthusiastically endorsed Mamdani. The possible silver lining of a Mamdani reign over New York City would be that it would wake up a lot of New Yorkers, and the pendulum may shift back to strong conservative like in the days of Rudy Giuliani. But in the meantime, Mamdani actually admits that he sees no point in incarcerating violent criminals. He says people are jailed only to make the victims feel better. This is the same guy who says he's going to fund his free everything for the people of New York by raising taxes on white people. His words, not mine. In the meantime, President Donald Trump and Tesla CEO Elon Musk greeted each other during Charlie Kirk's memorial service in Phoenix on Sunday, and even they sat next to each other during the service, showing that the two titans may be on their way towards mending fences. Kirk's producer, Andrew Colbert, said in an X post, Charlie so badly wanted these two men to come back together. I hope they're saying it to each other, saying that they will do it for Charlie. And as impetuous as he may seem at times, Musk urges earnestly to take a sledgehammer to the reviled Washington, D.C. status quo. Theoretically, Musk is the perfect person to be the George Soros of the MAGA right, a position that Musk once relished before his public falling out with President Trump. When fully activated, Musk can force the Republican funding and organizational apparatus to run a sleek, modernized, data-driven operation in the midterm elections that they would otherwise resist. I believe it's time for MAGA to mend fences with Elon Musk for the greater good of saving the country and winning the midterm elections. Democrats regularly put personal squabbles aside during election time for the betterment of pushing their agenda, and Republicans must show the same level of unity with Musk if we want to restore national greatness. Musk's drive, competence, and vision can prevent the arrogant political hacks of the Republican Party from exercising the mismanagement that they're very well known for. It's time for grace to be shown and for the healing process to begin, to welcome Elon Musk back into the fold and make him an integral part of the Republican electoral operation during the upcoming midterms. I'm Roger Stone. You're tuned in to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. I have now predicted that Donald Trump and Elon Musk will get back together again and reform the powerhouse that I think forged a new governing coalition in which common sense Democrats, independents, and independents joined not the Republican Party, but Donald Trump for a new golden age. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. The Department of Homeland Security is demanding that the rogue left-wing governments of California, Illinois, and New York comply with enforcement measures against illegal immigration. They're specifically concerned with those states refusing to comply with ICE detainers to keep criminal illegals off the streets. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said these dangerous sanctuary policies, often combined with cashless bail, such as New York City's, for serious crimes allow criminal illegal immigrants to be released back into America's communities, threatening the American people's lives and well-being. ICE detainers ask for something very simple: to notify ICE when criminal illegal aliens are released from jail or prison, to ensure that they go into ICE custody before they're released back onto our streets. These sanctuary state politicians should do the right thing and side with law-abiding Americans over criminal illegal aliens. There is no reason for these states not to comply with ICE detainers, except for the fact that they want illegals to overrun the country. Democrats are happy to let illegals run wild because they feel that the demographic shift will help them keep power. You see, ultimately, they want to register these people and have them all vote, even if it means innocent people will die and be victimized in the process. This is what's happened to the once great Democrat Party, the party of John F. Kennedy, the party of Harry S. Truman. That party no longer exists, having been hijacked by a radical Muslim clique. So there is no such thing as a moderate Democrat anymore. That's become, quite sadly, an oxymoron. While there's no question that the Trump administration should declare Antifa as a terrorist organization and end that organization's financing and orchestration of violence, destruction, and death, as well as ending USAID funding or a multitude of other extremist NGOs fomenting violence and illegal activity, as I've said before, the right must avoid the temptation to engage in the same cancel culture exercised by the left after they were stunned by President Donald Trump's improbable victory back in 2016. You see, reverence for the U.S. Constitution, and particularly for the First Amendment, means that free speech, again, must be protected. So as distasteful as this may be, speech that is repugnant, offensive, and vile, well, that must also be protected. That doesn't include yelling fire in a crowded theater, but distinctions can be made between offensive speech and exhortations that threaten public physical safety. I believe that the administration's on the right course. I was glad to see the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, back off the declaration about hate speech. Charlie Kirk himself, before his untimely death, said in a Twitter post, back when it was Twitter, that there was no such thing as hate speech. We cannot give in to the temptation to silence those that we disagree with when they're talking about actual political discourse. There's room for America for disagreement. There is, however, no room for violence. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Every day we get together here for a discussion of news, politics, history, and yes, occasionally a few tips on recipes and food, my other favorite subject. Meanwhile, we have a new majority in America. I think that the death of Charlie Kirk is going to have a profound effect on our politics, one that we cannot foresee, one that will impact the 2026 elections in a very positive way. As his own widow, Erica Kirk, said over the weekend, they have no idea what they have unleashed in terms of this new force in American politics. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. A groveling letter from Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to President Donald Trump has just been released, showing that Maduro is feeling the pain from recent bombing campaigns of drug boats near his shores. In the letter, Maduro claims that Venezuela is supporting narco-trafficking as fake news propagated through various media channels. Maduro included in the letter compelling data on drug production and drug trafficking that demonstrates that Venezuela is a territory free of drug production. Maduro said, I respectfully invite you, Mr. President, to promote peace through constructive dialogue and mutual understanding throughout the hemisphere. My sources tell me that Maduro is deathly afraid of being hit by a drone or worse. That's why he's suddenly trying to dupe President Donald Trump. I doubt that he'll be successful. It's absolutely clear that Maduro and his government are heavily engaged in the drug trade, as his nation's fledgling government could not survive without it financially. It's also clear that Maduro is in bed with China, helping China with its goal of putting fentanyl on the streets of America to weaken our country. Maduro is a socialist despot who cannot be trusted. He must be stopped, or else his poisonous ideology may spread like a cancer throughout Latin America. May the Venezuelan people rise up against this tyrant and put him behind bars where he belongs. Meanwhile, the communist insurgency really threatens us in Honduras as well, not to mention the regime in Cuba. You see, in Miami-Dade, there's an entire subculture of politicians who have dined out for decades in their opposition to the brutal Cuban regime. They raise millions in campaign funds, but the plight of the Cuban people never improves. Meanwhile, President Trump will meet with Argentinian President Javier Milei in New York City tomorrow, joined by Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, to discuss the best way that the countries can work together moving forward. It's absolutely clear that the Trump administration is firmly behind Milei as he frees free markets and restores prosperity to the nation, long beleaguered by massive spending, debt, and socialism. Secretary Bessent, who I think is among President Trump's very best appointees, said that Argentina is systematically important as a U.S. ally in Latin America, and the Treasury stands ready to do whatever is needed to mandate the support of Argentina. We're sending a message that if you do the right thing, if you follow good policies, that if you're aligned with the values of the United States, we're willing to provide assistance when things move out of equilibrium. Milei, who I became friendly with years ago before he was a political figure, we actually connected through the direct message function on what was Twitter, now known as X, is a proponent of libertarian economics, remains steadfast on eliminating government even as he gains prominent enemies throughout his own country. They won't make it easy for Javier Milei's revolution to hold and continue throughout decades to bring Argentina fully out of its economic malaise. Support from the Trump administration will help Milei stabilize his country and then put them on the road to once again being what they were, the Paris of South America. That's what they call Buenos Aires, the richest country in the region. Expect tomorrow's discussion with these two men to be very, very fruitful and, I think, very important for the future of freedom in this hemisphere. Meanwhile, following the passage of President Trump's big, beautiful bill and the subsequent increases in funding for immigrant enforcement, ICE is on a hiring spree, and they certainly have a lot to choose from. They have over 150,000 applications from patriots heeding the call who are ready to help remove illegal immigrants through mass deportations. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said ICE has received more than 150,000 applications from patriotic Americans who want to defend the homeland by removing the worst of the worst criminals who are here illegally in the United States. We have issued almost 18,000 tentative job offers. You see, Americans are answering their country's calls to serve and help remove murderers, pedophiles, rapists, terrorists, and gang members from our country. Meanwhile, the Democrats continue to complain about due process and try to protect those illegals who they ultimately hope to certify as voters and vote in our 2026 elections. They criticize us when we openly call this what it is, but it is an effort to flood and change the demographic of the American voting population. Those hired by ICE can receive perks such as a $50,000 signing bonus, student loan repayment and forgiveness, unlimited overtime, and enhanced retirement benefits. They're expected to use $30 billion to hire at least 10,000 more staffers in the department. ICE job fairs throughout the country have been hit with massive interest. They will have their pick of the litter to choose from as they sort through the massive number of applications. This is great news for the health of our country, as nobody is being scared off by the left from conducting immigration enforcement, which is primarily the goal of their violent demonstrations. Meanwhile, Wikipedia got caught after the brutal stabbing of Irina Zarutska. She's the woman who was very sadly depicted on a Charlotte subway car being killed by a violent, mentally ill thug named DeCarlos Brown Jr. It's emblematic of how the Democrats are putting innocent people in danger with their soft-on-crime policies. This prompted Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia that has been co-opted by the leftist propaganda machine for years, to attempt to censor information about this case. I've had my own experience with Wikipedia. If you check my bio there, you'll find that most of it's just wrong. And when I go in and change it to the facts, the truth, well, they just change it back. Wikipedia cannot be trusted as an unbiased source of information regarding anything, whether it's the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, or the Russian collusion hoax. Don't go to Wikipedia for information. All you'll get is propaganda. Far-left Wikipedia administrators repeatedly attempting now to delete the page on Zarutska's murder, and when that failed, they blocked all non-administrator notes on the page so they could just remove the name of the murderer. This received massive pushback, including from the House Freedom Caucus and Congressman Andy Biggs, who's been an outspoken critic of Wikipedia for their bias. The henchmen of the left want to keep Zarutska's case under wraps because it's emblematic of America's rising crime problem. The left likes to complain about systematic racism, white privilege, and oppression lurking beneath the surface, when it's the real glaring problem of white people getting disproportionately victimized by perpetrators that is obvious to anyone who will look. Because of their bizarre, diversity-obsessed worldview, the liberals are willing to let these criminals victimize more people because of the color of their skin. This is racism, and this is what we must fight and defeat. Zarutska's memory can be our rallying cry for cleaning up our streets. As my friend, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has said, we must never forget the violent murder of Irina Zarutska. I've looked at that video over and over again. It really still gives me the shakes. Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries appeared on CNN, where he showed the Democrats will stop at nothing spreading dangerous falsehoods about President Trump and his supporters, even after the vicious murder of Charlie Kirk. Congressman Jeffries said Donald Trump and these extremists have been destroying integrity. We should also blame the conservative justices on the Supreme Court for all the things that we see happening. They effectively enabled Donald Trump at times to behave just like a king. That needs to be revisited as well. The Supreme Court, shame on them for what they've done to this country. What does he mean, shame on them? You mean upholding the law? That's what they've done. You see, when a federal judge rules the way Democrats and liberals want them to, they're hailed as a great hero. But when they rule along the lines of the U.S. Constitution in favor of Trump administration policies, well, suddenly they're political appointees and they're illegitimate. It's all too often that we see this tactic being used. Democrats are in too deep to turn back now, in my opinion. They've convinced their constituents that every Trump supporter is a Nazi, a fascist, a white supremacist, a national Christian nationalist, a threat to democracy. Having done so, they put a target on the backs of people, well, people like me, who care about their country and just want to see it made great again. The Democrats are the one who tore this nation apart. This must never be forgotten. The time for unity is now, but only with those who care about America. The Democrats, sadly, in my opinion, do not apply in this regard. If you've read any of my books, you know that I criticize both Republicans and Democrats, having written the Bush crime family as well as the Clintons' war on women. But in this case, I'm reporting faithfully on today's Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, who was long cloaked in the guise of compassion and progress, was actually cultivated a legacy steeped in hate, violence, and bigotry that stretches back centuries and continues to poison American society today. From its historical roots in slavery and segregation to its modern-day incitement of political violence and intolerance, left has consistently weaponized division for power, leaving a trail of destruction that belies its self-proclaimed moral superiority. In 2025, as the nation reels from events like the assassination of my good friend Charlie Kirk, the left's enduring pattern of fostering hate and excusing murder stands exposed, revealing a party that thrives on animosity while masquerading as the champion of justice. The Democratic Party's origins are inseparable from its defense of slavery and racial oppression. Founded in the early 19th century, Democrats were the party of the Confederacy, championing slavery against Republican abolitionists like Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Post-Civil War, they birthed Jim Crow laws enforcing segregation and empowered the Ku Klux Klan, which served as the party's de facto militia in the South. Figures like Senator Robert Byrd, who's actually a former Senate Klansman who remained a Democrat icon into the 21st century, embodies this very legacy. The party's resistance to civil rights, with 80% of Democrats in Congress voting against the 1964 Civil Rights Act compared to 20% of Republicans, underscores this entrenched bigotry. It was only with Republican votes and being shepherded by Vice President Richard Nixon that the 1958 Civil Rights Act became law. That's the first and most significant piece of civil rights legislation since the Civil War, passed only with the support and leadership of Republicans. Even today, critics argue that the left's obsession with race-based policies like affirmative action and reparations perpetuates division, cloaking paternalistic racism in progressive rhetoric. It needs to be called out, and that's what I'm doing. The left's modern era is marked by rhetoric so venomous it has repeatedly incited violence. From the 1960s, when new left radicals like the Weather Underground bombed federal buildings and murdered law enforcement officers, to the 2020 BLM riots that left cities burning and dozens dead, Democrats have either excused or endorsed chaos. Leaders like Representative Maxine Waters, who in 2018 urged supporters to harass Trump officials in public, as well as Representative Jasmine Crockett, whose 2025 mockery of Governor Greg Abbott's disability inflamed tensions which have fueled this culture of hate. The September 2025 assassination of my good friend Charlie Kirk by Tyler Robinson, according to the government, a leftist radicalized by Democrat talking points, labeling conservatives as threats to democracy, is a direct result of this incendiary language. Robinson's texts, railing against Kirk's hatred, echo the left's playbook of demonizing opponents, yet Democrats like Representative Ocasio-Cortez deflected by calling for understanding his motives, revealing their refusal to condemn their own. The left's bigotry is not just historical, but thrives in its current dogma. Their obsession with identity politics, dividing people by race, gender, and sexuality, breeds intolerance under the guise of inclusion. Cancel culture, driven by leftists on platforms like X, targets dissenters with doxing and career destruction, as seen in 2024 when a Texas teacher was fired for questioning DEI mandates. The left's selective outrage, condemning hate speech from conservatives while excusing anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, or anti-white rhetoric from figures like Ilhan Omar, exposes a double standard rooted in ideological supremacy. Their policies, like open borders that strain minority communities or soft on crime stances that devastate urban areas disproportionately, harm the very groups they claim to champion, revealing a performative compassion that masks neglect. The left's complicity in murder extends beyond the rhetoric to policy and inaction. Even in the early 20th century, the Democrat-aligned unions like the United Mine Workers engaged in deadly clashes, killing dozens during strikes. In the 1970s, we saw leftist groups like the Black Panthers and the Symbionese Liberation Army commit murders in the name of revolution, often romanticized by liberal intellectuals. Now, fast forward to 2025, and Democrat-run cities like Chicago and Philadelphia witness soaring homicide rates under progressive district attorneys like Kim Foxx and Larry Krasner, who prioritize leniency over justice. We see this right there in Manhattan with our own Alvin Bragg. The 2020 riots, which Democrats downplayed as mostly peaceful, resulted in over 25 deaths and over $2 billion in damage, with leaders like Vice President Kamala Harris bailing out rioters. Kirk's murder, enabled by a climate of leftist vitriol, is but the latest chapter in the long history of the left excusing or inciting violence while blaming conservatives for the fallout. The Democrats' strategy hinges on stoking division to maintain control. You see, by framing every issue, whether it's immigration, crime, or free speech, as a moral crusade, they cast opponents as evil, justifying, therefore, any means whatsoever to silence them. This tactic, evident in their post-9/11 support for the Patriot Act to surveil extremists, which was later used against conservatives like me, continues in 2025 and calls to label MAGA supporters as domestic terrorists. This is the truth. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. You know, I am a political animal. In fact, that was the name of a famous profile on me in the Standard magazine back in the 90s. There's nothing I like better than watching a political debate. And I saw one this weekend that was really entertaining. This was a heated debate in New Jersey's upcoming gubernatorial election, which is turning into a one-sided affair after the Democrats' corruption was fully exposed by her Republican opponent in front of the entire state. On Sunday, New Jersey Globe hosted a showdown between Trump-endorsed businessman and former state representative Jack Ciattarelli and Democrat Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, which took place at Rider University. The debate focused on issues ranging from taxes, housing, and the cost of living, education, and yes, tariffs. Of course, Sherrill soon became nasty and decided to mock Ciattarelli while bragging about her perceived prospects in the race, which is actually, according to polling that I've seen now, a dead heat. President Donald Trump ran surprisingly strong in the Garden State, considering it was not a state that was targeted by the Trump campaign, who needed to reserve their resources for the swing states, all of which were carried in the end by Donald Trump. Therefore, the late Trump surge in New Jersey gives light to the fact that New Jersey, the Garden State, which has not elected a Republican governor in years, could actually elect a Republican this November. Ciattarelli kept his cool throughout the entire debate, and then he calmly laid out the stark choice between New Jersey residents must face in November. Either a man dedicated most of his life to the private sector versus a career politician who profited off of taxpayer dollars. There's another big difference between her public service and my public service, Ciattarelli began. It actually cost me money with the amount of time I put in as a state rep. It took away from my company and my family. Then Ciattarelli thrust the dagger. I really love this, by revealing that Sherrill greatly enhanced her wealth during her 7 years as a member of Congress by trading defense stocks and therefore violating federal law. Nancy Pelosi would envy this level of corruption and personal enrichment. In the 7 years that she'd been in Congress, she's tripled her net wealth, Ciattarelli said. There's another big difference between the two of us. She broke the law. She had to pay fines for violating federal law on stock trades and stock reporting. And the New York Times reports that while you're sitting on the House Armed Services Committee, you can't trade defense stocks. That is precisely what she did. When the far-left New York Times calls out a Democrat for wrongdoing, well, the whole truth is probably even worse. This revelation should immediately end Sherrill's campaign and lead to the Department of Justice opening an investigation into her. Nobody is, after all, above the law. I actually think with the announcement by my good friend Cliff Maloney, that he is deploying the shoe leather tactics of door-to-door, old-fashioned shoe leather politics to the Garden State with his New Jersey Chase program that served the President Trump so extraordinarily well in neighboring Pennsylvania, that the Garden State's governorship is actually within grasp. Know a lot about the Garden State. I ran Tom Kaine's governor's race there in 1981 and his smashing re-election there in 1985. I also managed the state for Ronald Reagan in two different presidential campaigns in 1980 and in 1984. New Jersey can fall to the Republicans. New Jersey can go red. And Jack Ciattarelli, I think, is exactly the right candidate to lead that resurgence. This was a great debate. If you didn't see it, I urge you to go to the website of the New Jersey Globe to check it out. This was real political combat, but the fact that Sherrill, who's originally from Virginia, is an elitist and is not in touch with the working class sensibilities of New Jersey shone through in the entire debate. If you love politics, or if you're from New Jersey, or even if you're not, and you want to see a great debate, I urge you to check this one out. That's it for us today on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we thank you for joining us. Until tomorrow, God bless you, and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?